then it will have a very stable country. It will be able to move forward. It will minimize the frictions and differences. It will surmount the challenges that come from outside, because coming together to draw a program and to unite around the program will close the gaps for those who would like to interfere again from outside. Because the colonial experience never stopped, even after independence. They try to find one way or another to come in between the people and once again to fragment them. And we have seen this in Sudan since our independence. We are facing troubles, we are facing interventions, and unfortunately we were not able to do that immediately after the British left the country. And there was a moment when we felt that the rebellion in southern Sudan in August 1955 could be a reason for our leadership, whom today we have to celebrate and we have to commend for their valiance, for their thoughtfulness, for their capability of struggling until independence was realized. But unfortunately, that moment when the rebellion in southern Sudan occurred, it should have brought to the attention of our leaders the significance of putting a program to overcome this challenge of southern Sudan. Whether it is going to be part of a united Sudan, or whether it will keep the country always under foreign intervention, and it will weaken the unity, and it will dishearten the people, and it will continually result in refugees and displaced peoples, and it will continually erode the national resources in fighting the rebellion rather than in developing the country. Sadly, we were not able to do that. And this is the one thing that makes the national dialogue significantly important, because it completes the entire concept of independence by bringing all the players in the political scene and in the social scene, all the parties and all the armed groups who came together to discuss and negotiate sincerely and objectively for 3 years. And then the social components, the social components. Well, this is also remarkable because it has never been in the history of Sudan. Because when you address the people, when you allow them to participate and to express their aspirations, you see, you gain their confidence and you gain the wisdom of the people. There is no wisdom other than the wisdom of the people, because the people are usually very, very genuine, very sincere. The politicians have their own sometimes ambitions, individual ambitions, sadly. But remarkably, this national dialogue has combinedly brought the two together, the political dialogue and the social dialogue. And the outcome of all that, while many people around us in neighboring countries or in Western countries, they never thought that the Sudanese would come together. But surprisingly, like we came together in the Independence Day, because well before independence, the Sudan was divided almost into two. But in a historical moment, when Azhari declared the independence of the country, both parties and everyone rallied behind this new slogan of independence. Likewise, the national dialogue brought all the parties together, and they passed this national document. This national document is a road map for the first time in the history of Sudan. You know, the fundamental problem that faced us is that since independence, every party will come with his own program. That's a partisan program. The way he thinks he can move the country forward. Others would think, well, that is his program, we have nothing to do with it. So they start opposing him, creating problems to him. He will not be able to realize, even if he fights sincerely, to realize that program on the ground. And then comes another government with a different program, and then another government, military or coalition of parties. This is why some of the failures we see in our country have happened. Now that we have a one united program, the result of participation of more than 80 parties and more than 37 armed groups, and the result of social component to this program, now that we have this program around which we all unite, and we have a rare opportunity of being able to chart a course that will take Sudan out of its problems, out of its challenges. We need to be very sincere and to be very serious and to take this program. As a member of the National Assembly, I assure you that this has been discussed thoroughly. The necessary amendments in the Constitution that will allow the institutions that are to be established as a result of the National Dialogue document are about to be passed maybe in 2 or 3 days. That will happen. That will give the opportunity now for the President and for the parties that shared and contributed to the National Dialogue to formulate a new national government.
It will be a new shape of Sudan.
Yeah, and it will not be only one national government at the seat of government in Khartoum. It will be also state governments, a national assembly which will incorporate new members from the national dialogue teams. So it will also be a national assembly and the legislative assemblies of the different states around the country. We are going to witness a new beginning and a new direction, a new charter that will take us into the future. This requires that every individual in Sudan feels that we are about to launch a new Sudan. And we have to be part of this. We have to address very seriously this. Surprisingly, at this very important juncture in the history of the country, you find that some Sudanese citizens, young or old, who would like to impose a course of line that runs diametrically opposed to the National Dialogue document. It has been a result of very serious efforts for 3 years. I think this is very irrelevant. It's not even thoughtful. When people come together and draw a line, no one should stand before that. Let us see this experience. Let us give it time. Let us see how it works. Because it is not a machination or a work of one group. It's a work of more than 80 parties and more than 37 armed groups who came and discussed very sincerely and openly. So anything that is supposed to happen against this document at this moment is very irrelevant and very destructive. It doesn't catch the move of the moment. It doesn't catch the motive of the people of Sudan. And maybe this is very important for everyone to understand. Let us give this national dialogue a time. Yeah, exactly.
And even sometimes there is like a battle of media, outside battle of media. They said battle of media. Some contradictions come into the ground because maybe media discourse is not that sufficient one and has many deficiencies to address the outside of the world for our context. Maybe this is like assumes like a problem.
Certainly, I agree with you. The challenge in our world today, a world that is becoming global. So you're not only dealing with your own problems, you are dealing with the world problems. You are not only addressing your people, addressing the people of the world. So you have to understand the world that you are addressing and the world that you are facing its interventions in your own country. So this requires that you develop a program, a strategy, and tactics so that you are able to deal with the world. You are able to pass your own message and it should reverberate across the world. It cannot reverberate. It cannot cross the minds of others. It cannot transcend the borders unless you design your own message in a way that is totally conscious of what is happening around you in the world. Yeah, I think this is a challenge to our national media, and a challenge to our politicians, and a challenge almost to our intellectuals, that we need to devise new ways and tactics of addressing the world with our own problems, with our own aspirations. That is something that we should all work together to develop that strategy and that tactic, and make our media more effective and capable of penetrating the media.
Of course, as you have like long experience with external foreign ministry efforts, and you have like your own life, you live it in North America, in the United States. I want you to shed light on our relations with United States in terms of positivity, and how we can overcome our economic sanctions as to receive or to reach like a safe target point.
Because unfortunately the US administrations successively have worked to dominate the world. And any country that has an ambition to be independent or to preserve its natural resources and not to allow them to be accessible unless in an equation that is acceptable to it, or a country that has a strategic location also and does not allow that location to be used by the power number one unless it accepts the equation. Unfortunately, any country that has any of these will be subjected to tremendous pressure from the US administration. And moreover, if that country lies in the sphere where Israel considers it its own sphere, its own region, its own area of domination, any country that lies within that also cannot be embraced by the US unless one way or another it appeases the US politicians. And sadly, Sudan is in a position that is almost has a problem in each and every one of these aspects and components. And because of that, Sudan has been, unfortunately, put in the list of countries harboring terrorism in 1993. I remember very well that President Carter, the former President Carter, he spent the night in the White House, and in the morning he held a press conference. And he said, I was last night in the White House, and I asked them why they put Sudan in the list of countries harboring terrorism. And they failed to give any evidence. They said, we just have very strong accusations. And he said to him, this is not the right way. You don't put people in the list of countries harboring terrorism because of accusations, however strong they are. We put them when we have an evidence, irrefutable evidence. Look, this is an American president contesting his own government, led by his own party for that. But unfortunately that remained. Then in 1997, Sudan was put in the list of sanctions, severe sanctions. You see, I have studied the sanctions all over the world. There is no sanction that is so horrible and adversely affecting the people like the American sanctions on Sudan.
Yes, on housing.
It is unilateral, and it is unjust, and it is against, it is not passed by the UN or by the Security Council. It is only unilateral. And unfortunately, the unilateral American sanction has turned out to be multilateral. How did that happen? Because the US would immediately affect any company from any country in the world that is working with Sudan to say to them, you have to choose either to work with the US or to work with Sudan. But countries like Germany, for example, Siemens, the German company, or Alcatel, the French company, institutions like that, they deal with America with billions, tens of billions of dollars. They cannot risk dealing with Sudan with 500 or even $1 billion and all that. So they imposed these sanctions even on European companies if they start to deal with Sudan. And you remember the Paribas Bank, which was dealing with Sudan, it was fined $9 billion for dealing with Sudan and Iran. So the political sanctions, and I call them political because they are not objective by any standard. It's merely political. And let me show you how they are political, just from one aspect. Sudan and Iran were both considered as prior country, rogue countries, and there were American sanctions imposed on both of them. Sudan and Iran were considered countries harboring terrorism. Suddenly, America lifted the sanctions from Iran and maintained the sanctions on Sudan. You could see very clearly that this is a political sanction. It's a political move. How could they lift it from Iran and maintain it on Sudan? So Sudan has always maintained a policy of building positive relationship with the world. We have an open door policy, an open-minded policy to deal with the world and to deal with our neighbors. That policy even regarding refugees from neighboring countries, the Sudanese borders are open for all our neighbors. Consider them brothers and sisters, and we have that same policy also with them. And for that matter, Sudan has always maintained its embassy in the US. I was selected as ambassador of Sudan in Washington, D.C. with the US in 1996, and I arrived there in February 1996. I met President Clinton, and he said a very clear message, and I wanted to take him for that. He said, we have problems with Sudan. It is democracy, it is what is happening in southern Sudan, the war in southern Sudan, and the human rights that come usually from wars, and it's the problem of terrorism. If Sudan moves in the right direction, we will embrace every step taken by Sudan. Look at what happened. We passed an agreement after negotiations, very serious negotiations with the Southern Rebellion movement, and that agreement was implemented. In that agreement, a referendum should be granted to the southern people. It was granted, and if the result of the referendum is their choice of secession, it should be granted. We did all that peacefully. We gave the South a country, and we gave it oil, and we gave it life. That was one of the legs that the President Clinton was saying. We resolved peacefully on our side. Actually, the government of the South was never peaceful with Sudan, but we were peaceful with it. But we implemented that. We implemented it to the surprise of the entire Western world. They never thought that the Sudanese will implement the stipulates of this agreement, but we did, contrary to their expectations. Secondly, we started moving from a military government into a broad-based, open-minded government. In 1996, we had our first elections. In 2000, we had our second elections. In 2005 was supposed to be the open election that allows all parties to participate in the elections. But then when the agreement was about to be realized in 2005, most people said, why shouldn't we postpone this election so that we give all the participants of peace an opportunity to come and share in that. As a result of that agreement, the Sudanese National Assembly, the Parliament of Sudan, embraced all the participants in the political scene. I remember very well the communists were represented in Baath Party. The unionists were in that part, in the parliament. The SPLA, SPLM movement was in that parliament. So it opened up and it embraced more people in government and in parliament. And then you remember in 2010 we had our third election, 2010 had our third election. Oh, it was open for all parties. And then in 2015 we had our fourth national election open for all parties. Today there are 20 parties in the national parliament, likewise in the state legislatures, and all of them are embraced in the government. This is not a government of one party. This is not a parliament of one party. You see, unfortunately, many people deny the reality of what is happening today. They only say this is the government of the national party. Even when we have a dialogue in which more than 80 parties participate and more than 37 armed groups who come from outside and participate, they say no. This national dialogue is only a national dialogue of the national, what do you call it? National Congress Party, NCP. They deny the facts that are on the airs and all this. You cannot establish facts on denial of reality and all that. But I brought this point to tell you that peace was brought to the South. The transition toward democracy has been going step after step until now, and it is an open system, it's an open democracy, it's an open. The US security agencies started dialogue with our national security. And after very serious dialogues, they came to the realization that Sudan is not a country that is harboring terrorism. This is the testimony of the US security agencies, and they have been saying that. See? And I met some of them when I was in the US, I mean in one of the visits, and they told me openly, this is what we have come to, and we are cooperating with Sudan against terrorism. Because Sudan for some time also was accused of being an extremist country. Now people have seen what extremism is. They have seen it in Iraq, they have seen it in Syria, they have seen it in Libya, they have seen what terror is. And Sudan, fortunately, is a country that is safe from terrorism until now, thank God. That tells how misunderstanding, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misconceptions are surrounding the Sudan. So every element of what former President Clinton said, if Sudan will move forward in this area, we'll embrace it, every one of them is realized on the ground. But unfortunately, until today, Sudan has never been embraced and all that, you see. I hope that the new coming administration in the US will open its mind and heart and will reach out and will deal fairly with a country like Sudan, who has become a center of peace and stability in the region. We are the only country who gave an example of sacrifice for peace in the world. You see? And we are today, in our region, a center of peace and stability. They know this very well. And many of them have been talking to us about that. We are proud that our people are peaceful-minded people. And I hope that this will contribute to positive change for the future of relations between Sudan and the new administration.
Hopefully so. So we stop it here and go and watch and be back.